Yeah, Barfly Brooks said you were on his shit list, but that's another thing. He loves you too. Oh, yeah, like Alexander Haig has passed away. This is a great guy from the Reagan administration. After Reagan was shot, he stood up. I'm in charge now, without any acknowledgement, you know, of like, you know, the order of things. You know, it goes to the vice president, then the Speaker of the House. You're not part of it. Oh, yes, the Reagan years. All right. You know, I didn't even get a chance to look at the newspaper today. Sometimes I hit a story or something. But I had that argument going on back and forth with Napalm Blut. And it's all just the same stuff over and over again about, you know, I'm sorry, Napalm, you're a good guy. But, you know, and the other thing we disagree on is global warming. And my good friend Alan, Fuckery, what's Alan's channel name now? It's Fuckery for You 1958. We disagree on the global warming. Alan dislikes Al Gore, thinks it's a conspiracy, the carbon tax and all that. And but it's this hard idea for some people to believe, because you've got like Glenn Beck going on like, carbon dioxide, it's something I breathe out. How can that be harmful? Yeah, try putting a bag over your head for a while and just breathe nothing but your own CO2. Then see what happens, okay? You know, I work in a welding shop, and some types of welding, MIG welding, requires CO2 as a shield. And try taking that pose of CO2 and putting it up to your nose and taking a whiff. Just try it. I mean, sure, CO2 is in our atmosphere. Plants live on it. It's all part of that. But it has to be acknowledged that if we're putting out more CO2 and upsetting the natural balance of how much CO2 is in the atmosphere and affecting our weather, I think there's something to it. And I'm not going to listen to corporations and people like Glenn Beck that aren't real scientists. And sure, there's a few scientists that disagree, and I'm willing to listen to them. But the vast consensus from good, solid, scientific papers, and you can just start with Scientific American. That's the most accessible for the general public. I mean, I used to read Popular Science when I was a kid, and then I later started reading Scientific American. There was a lot of Scientific American stuff that went way over my head. But still, I've gone back and read it, and there's areas like like earth science and things like that where I can pick it up pretty readily. But when they start talking about certain types of physics, then they lose me. Admittedly, I'm not strong in the sciences where it involves a lot of math. I understand basic chemistry. And that's the thing that's so frustrating when a lot of these people that argue against, you know, that try to come up with arguments, just regular folk. Like I was having an argument with a guy that must have got his degree from refrigeration repair school, because he kept talking about how air pressure was what regulated atmospheric temperature. Air pressure alone. And it was just so hard getting around this guy. He kept coming back to the same. I said, yes, if you have a cylinder and you apply pressure to it, the temperature will go up. But that doesn't explain the reason why when your car's sitting in the sun and the windows are all rolled up, how the interior gets hotter than the outside. Oh, he says, no, it's because it's air pressure. No, it's because the greenhouse effect. The sunlight passes through the windows, heats the interior, becomes infrared. The infrared cannot leave, bounces back off the windows and is contained. Okay? When you roll all the windows down, the sunlight kind of goes in, bounces off the seats and goes back out. But when you close the windows, the sunlight bounces off hits the seats, turns into heat, and is trapped inside. It's not about air pressure. And it's so frustrating to have arguments with people that don't have basic understandings of science. I've had people tell me, you know, I said, lock yourself in a room, you know, and just breathe CO2 and see what happens. They said, oh, I'll bring plants in there with me. You know, that's not the point. You're not a plant, okay? The plant is almost like reverse. It needs the CO2 along with the sunlight for photosynthesis. Human beings do not use photosynthesis. It just drives me crazy. Oh my. Some of these people just hate Al Gore. They just hate him. You know, the same way they just hated Bill Clinton. The same way that I just hate George Bush. Oh, you know, that somehow it's a leftist global conspiracy. And then you hear the same crazy group saying that Adolf Hitler was a liberal, and that trying to make the Green Movement as akin to the beginnings of Nazism. I've even seen that argument trotted out. You know, that Adolf Hitler is the one who started the Green Movement. Just ridiculous. One of the interesting things, I was having a discussion with somebody over the phone, and it was about the world government, you know, to be afraid of that. Or the New World Order. That's a little more accurate, because the New World Order could be a privatized system, much like in the movie Rollerball. Anybody familiar with the original one? I didn't watch the second one, the remake. But in Rollerball, the world had become a series of corporations. And it wasn't good. You know, wasn't good for the average person. And, or there could be a world government, and it could be, in the program about the Roman Empire, excuse me, it was pointed out the Roman Empire was the first model, or it could be said about the Greeks, but the Roman Empire is an early model of a world government. That essentially the Romans had their hands in what was then known as the known world. And how they ruled was with a strong military, by torture and fear. And that is a model that some people want the U.S. to follow. They want to go back, they want to go at the terrorists the same way that they go after us. You know, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That round them up and torture them. Put fear into them. The same way the Roman Empire ruled. Well, I don't see that. I think the British Empire had a better way of ruling. It wasn't perfect. You know, terrible things happened in India. But in the end, Gandhi used their own sense of fair play against them, where he came up with passive resistance. Because the British Empire had thought too highly of themselves to be somebody. The Romans would have just said, screw you. And they would have mowed down Gandhi and his followers. But the British Empire thought themselves as very civilized and said, well, we won't stoop to that. We will not kill unarmed people. And I think that is not a perfect model, the British Empire, but it's a start. And maybe something modeled more after an American democracy and other, you know, a UN where people have a say. But to have it in the hands of the private sector, no, 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 no. I think that's like some terrible future. And I think that's the one that the people on the right, the fringe right, that are afraid of the New World Order should really pay attention to. Because, and the other thing that I say, if you really want to prevent the New World Order entirely, don't speak English. Because English is the language of the world. And we can probably thank the British Empire for that. I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. I just make this stuff up as I go along. It's what my stuff about history and the way I see it. And of course, since I don't have a brain, I'm not unable to process any of this. All right, everybody. I've gone on long enough. Everybody have a great week. Thanks for watching World Fez. All right. Yeah, have a great week. And I might have a surprise for you next week. A little surprise. A sponsor or something. We'll see. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.